Hi guys, and welcome back, and today we'll get stuck into making a nice little wooden box out of wood. So these are just some of my initial attempts, some prototyping, just to develop a bit of a technique so I can repeat it over and over again if I need to. Now before you say, hang on dickhead, why would we bother doing that when there's a truckload of plastic kits and resin stowage pieces that do the job perfectly well? And I would say correct, that is true. But in this instance, because of the particular scene I'm making, there are some very particular boxes in that scene, and none of them look like the standard boxes that you can get from plastic kits or resin. So I thought it might be good to have a deep dive into what you need to do to make one. Plus it's heaps cheaper. So this will be a 1/35th scale wooden box. And as I said, it's a particular scene in a movie. So I've got a picture that I've printed off which has a man's foot relatively close to where the box is and other boxes around it. So I'm guessing based on that it's about 32 inches in length, 24 inches in width, and about 16 inches in height. So, I mean, that's as close to scientific measurement as I can get with the screenshot of the scene printed out. So I then convert those inches into millimetres. So I'm of an age where I learned everything as a child in inches, and I think in inches, but I need to do everything from a measurement perspective in millimetres. So to get the handy dandy inches to millimetres conversion app open. And then once you've got the millimetres, you can just divide that by 35, and that will give you the 1/35th equivalent of it in real life. So the box itself is box-shaped, and this is my beautiful artistic ability coming out. And it's got two planks on the side, it's got two planks on the top, and it's got two planks on the end, which actually run the other way, not that way. And then it's got this sort of H-shaped contraption of wood holding it together at each end. So it's a fairly simple looking box, but nothing that I could specifically find scouring the commercial products available. So I thought, well, it can't be that hard. I haven't really ever made boxes before, but I thought using wood to make a wooden box should be a piece of piss. So starting off with just a piece of balsa wood, and that's 9.3 mil in width, and the depth the height doesn't really matter. And then marking up, measuring that for the length of the actual box. And throughout this you'll see I use a tiny little miter saw. Now you could easily cut through all the materials with your X-Acto blade, but that I find tends to crush and give you a slightly pointy shovel type end to the timber. So these are just tiny little icy pole sticks, 5.6 mil wide. I got a packet of 100 of these for about $1.50, and then using the teeth of the very fine miter saw, scored those to create a little bit of wood grain texture, which I was really, really happy with. It came out quite nicely. So basically just glued those to the two pieces of balsa wood, which gives it a little bit of stability rather than just trying to glue the little icy pole sticks to each other. And I did that with the first couple of prototypes, and they all went a bit wonky. And plus I was also using white glue prototyping and found it just much superior using the super glue. You don't have to hold things in place for as long, and as long as you get it right first up, it's sweet. You can get on to sanding and then putting the next piece on pretty much straight away. So, pretty evident. I put all the pieces on with overhang at each end. I tried to clean up any excess glue as possible Did a little bit of rescribing where it was necessary to show the distinction between the two different pieces of wood, and then was able to just saw off the overhang so I had a nice flush finish at each end. So these were all things I found during the prototyping, that if I cut everything to length first, no matter how hard I measured and how desperately I tried to get the cutting right, there was always something wrong. Now, you can see here the top of the box is sort of going inwards a little bit, and that was okay. I just cut a piece of skewer the right length and put that in to wedge them open, and then carried on with the rest of the construction. So you can see what's going on here. I'll come back in a tick. Now, once the box was built, I just had to do the wooden pieces at the end, the H-type arrangement. And for that, I just used this 0.3mm plastic card, because it looks quite thin in the photo, and I didn't want to use the same icy pole sticks because they were way too thick. So just scored that plastic again with the saw blade, and simple use of super glue to whack it on. And once that was done, just came back in with a pin to put in some nail holes. So I'm using the AK Old and Weathered Wood set, and started off with using the wood base, just splashing that on everywhere. The good thing about timber is it soaks it up. The only thing you need to be careful with is where you've got the end pieces and the raised pieces, that you don't get pooling along the edges. So as this is the base coat, not all that careful, just working it in, and then removing surplus. And then I tend to blow off using the airbrush just to get rid of any potential risk of pooling. So it's already brought the grain up a little bit, and looks like a promising start. So next up, I went with the metallic gun grey, and that's just to work a little bit of that metallic colour into the nail holes. A little bit of over poke onto the rails there, but that will disappear with the wipe of a thumb and the subsequent wood coats. So on with the painting, and now the next colour in is the wood grain colour. Now in this instance I chose to stipple it, because I didn't want a solid block of colour. I wanted some of the lighter colour to show through from underneath. and that got the desired result, so I was fairly happy with that. And then when that had dried, I went back in with the wood grain again, and this time I sponged some on, didn't put a lot on, just to get some variation and even a little bit of textural variation, although that's quite subtle. And then when that had dried, I went back in with the wood grain again, and this time I sponged some on, didn't put a lot on, just to get some variation and even a little bit of textural variation, although that's quite subtle. And then some fresh cut timber, all from the same set, and again just lightly sponging this on. So trying to preserve the layers that have gone before it and not just completely overpaint everything. And starting to feel like it's looking like a box now, a nice little bit of variation in the tones. And then in with the weathered wood. And again, making a wash of this, so it's reasonably dilute anyway, and I just put 1 drop of that in to 3 drops of water. And applying that fairly thinly and working it in, ideally wanting that to catch up in the grains, and then again using the airbrush to blow away any of the surface that I don't want pooling. So a paint that's not in the set, this is Panzerace's New Wood, and I like to use the New Wood to do the highlighting and dry brushing, which is what these pictures show. Due to a tragic SD card error, I lost the footage of me actually doing that, but I think you can all imagine what dry brushing looks like. And then the last piece of the painting puzzle is a very diluted black wash, and that is really just something I want to get into the recesses of the wood grain, so into the cracks, and definitely not have pool up on the surface or in the corners or anywhere like that. So just a little bit of working in along the way, and then a little bit of wiping off where required if it was a little bit too heavy before it had fully dried. Into the home straight now with a little bit of Vallejo matte acrylic varnish to protect it, just spraying that on with the airbrush. And again, better to do a few light coats than one super heavy coat. And then finishing it off with the soft pastels and mainly sticking in the grey and the dark grey ranges. And that's mainly because the scene itself is a very dusty looking scene. A big firefight's been happening and there's lots of debris and the like. So I progressively worked my way down through a quite dark grey initially. Blow off any of the surplus with the airbrush. Back in again with a slightly lighter grey. And this is really like cooking, seasoned to taste, and you'll stop when you think it's right. From the Rust and Dust set, I'm just going to put a little bit of rust around and where that might have bled out onto the box itself. And again, I put that on and then use just plain water to dilute it and to get that sort of random spread of the rust stain as it might happen in the real world. And then the finishing touch, because there's been a bit of fire in this scene as well, a little bit of black pastel powder applied towards one end in particular, and again I am copying an actual box from the scene, so it's a little bit specific, and that's the finishing touches. And that's pretty much it. So a few pictures here of the finished product. Reasonably happy with how it came out. There's probably a few things that I might improve on subsequent versions of it, but hopefully you got a couple of hints and tips out of it, and certainly would have seen that it's not a scary thing to do and something that the beginner could turn their hand to. So Anyway, as always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you up in the next one, which will be the painting video of the Tiger tank. Cheers. So if you like this video, hit the thumbs up and share. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and ding the donger. And of course, leave a comment because I love reading them. Cheers.